Most stories about the Kee Bird describe it as a failed recovery attempt. The tragic fire, an irreplaceable historic plane that, let's face it, almost made it home. But the framing misses the real lesson. You see, what rarely makes it into history books, it's not the fire. It's how many fragile systems had to survive long before that fire ever started. From a project engineering standpoint, the Kee Bird recovery expedition, it didn't fail because of bad luck. It failed because too many of those fragile systems had to succeed at the same time. In an environment that routinely punished delay, optimism, and even small mistakes. This wasn't just a recovery effort. It was a systems engineering gamble. A roll of the dice. And let's face it, Greenland will never let you get away with that.
The Kee Bird was a B-29 SuperFortress, forced down in Greenland after the Second World War. For decades, it sat frozen in place, locked in ice, cold, and isolation. Time did something unusual here. Instead of erasing the aircraft, the environment preserved it, at least visually. Now, the airframe remained largely intact. The engines were still present. And the structure looked solid enough to invite a dangerous idea. That the aircraft hadn't merely survived, but that it might actually be returned to life. And that belief changed everything. Ice is a deceptive caretaker. And let's dig into that. It preserves form far better than it preserves function. Metal can look sound, while microscopic corrosion advances underneath. Rubber seals harden, crack, or lose elasticity. And electrical insulation becomes brittle and unpredictable. These changes don't announce themselves. They hide behind the illusion of intact surfaces. So when the Kee Bird's engines turned over,
Don't have much in the way of nose oil pressure on 3 there. Well, it's coming up now.
and when systems responded,
Manifold pressure gauge just came loose. There she comes.
it felt like some kind of weird confirmation.
There's a surge of adrenaline. I want to get in it and go. And I think it'll make it.
But engineering doesn't work on appearances.
We've got to hook everything up to them to make sure that they work. Got to put the magnetos on, the generators, all the fuel system, the oil system. It probably takes 12, 14 hours after the time you stick it on there per motor to actually get them going. And that's in a nice heated hangar with all the tools that you need. But so when it's blowing snow sideways, it takes a little bit longer.
This aircraft wasn't aging as a single object. It was a B-29 SuperFortress.
Back here is the engineer's station. It's very complete, and most things work. Important things.
Miles of wiring.
And this big round thing is a turret.
Hundreds and hundreds of different components. It was aging as so many different independent systems, each failing at a different rate, in different ways, and most importantly, for different reasons.
The tires, they look good, but they're rayon, and rayon doesn't age well, so we brought up some nylon tires to change them out. The rudder and the elevators are going to be changed out. Coming on over here to the ailerons, the control surfaces were fabric, and they have to be changed. They were paper thin. You could put your finger right through them.
Well, the snow really cushioned it real well. It built up under the bomb bays, and the bomb bay doors took all the load and about 90% of the damage. There's a little bit of damage on the aft fuselage, and on the flaps, but that's it.
What the ice preserved was confidence, not reliability.
It really is a unique opportunity. It may be the only airplane in the world that I can think of that's been sitting somewhere for 50 years that you could actually get in and potentially fly. It's just in a faraway place. That's the reason it's available.
All right, here we go. Let's go. Huh.
Okay, set it down.
Damn!
Yeah, look at that.
See, that's what happens when you have the first team in.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, this is where optimism quietly takes root. Because when progress becomes visible, it becomes easy to believe the hardest part
Okay, that looks good.
is already behind you. But progress is never a strong foundation. I mean, you can make progress on building a house of cards, but we all know, in the end, it will come crashing down.
Every recovery effort lives or dies on logistics. And Greenland, let's face it, offers no forgiveness. There were no roads, no ports, no warehouses. Every tool had to be anticipated months in advance. Every part had to be ordered and flown in. Every gallon of fuel needed to be specially refined and carried with it a certain consequence.
Suffering from internal bleeding, he is flown to a hospital in Canada and rushed to surgery.
There was no spare aircraft waiting in reserve. After all, the Huey helicopter had broken down right as the expedition was starting.
The chopper heads out over the glacier.
So that just left the Caribou. There was no easy way to replace damaged components. No quote-unquote next day shipping if something broke unexpectedly. This wasn't a recovery site. Rather, it was a closed system.
People on the ground do not realize that something has gone seriously wrong.
And closed systems fail catastrophically when even one assumption proves wrong.
The flaps had failed, and Roger had nearly lost control.
Logistics didn't just support the mission. They defined how much failure the mission could absorb. And as we all learned, the answer was almost none.
The Caribou has plowed into the soft earth. Another inch, and the propellers would have smashed into the ground.
In the Arctic, time behaves differently. Summer is not a season as we know it. It's more of a narrow window. Weather delays don't just pause progress, they compress it. You see, every lost day forces more work into the fewer remaining hours. Every delay, subconsciously, increases urgency. Every forecast becomes a source of pressure.
It's going to have to sit down and take a long thinking session about what we're going to do. I haven't given up. We've got too much, we're too close. The airplane is essentially ready to fly.
This is where systems start to erode. Maintenance becomes faster. Checks become abbreviated. Decisions shift from what's safest to what's possible. No one makes reckless choices. But choices are made under compression. And compression changes our behavior.
Every flight of the Caribou was a flirtation with death.
And the calendar then becomes the most unforgiving system of all.
The lake is covered in snowdrifts, but Daryl's main concern is how long it will remain frozen.
I'd say 2 weeks. We've got to get on that lake or we're in trouble.
The snow is piled up around the Kee Bird.
Nothing has failed yet. But the system, it's already under strain. And strained systems never break where you'd expect.
The equipment, I thought we could get by with some old equipment, but even the new equipment gave us trouble. I mean, this is the just harsh environment.
Engineering failures are often blamed on machines. But more often, and experience shows this, they begin with people under pressure. Long days in harsh conditions. High emotional investment. The psychological weight of being so close. Stopping then doesn't feel like caution. It feels kind of like surrender.
What I'm concerned about is the drifts on the lake. I tried to flatten them out with the bulldozer and the grader that we've got, but I may have created more problem than I cured because it left little mounds The problem with the B-29 is there's no nose wheel steering, and so when I hit one of these mounds with the right gear, it's going to pull right. It's a problem. We're just going to have to get out and try it.
Risk becomes familiar, and familiarity breeds normalization.
There's a surge of adrenaline. I want to get in it and go, and I think it'll make it.
Darrell strides to the cockpit. The dream that has obsessed him for 3 years is just hours from being realized.
Each individual decision seems reasonable. Each compromise feels temporary. But risk doesn't accumulate linearly. It stacks.
As the propellers shimmer in the sunlight, Darrell puts the coordinates for Thule into the newly installed satellite navigation system.
And eventually the system that was all so carefully planned out becomes dependent on everything continuing to go right. That's not safety. That's fragility.
And when systems are fragile, failure never arrives gradually. I mean, come on. What always happens? It blows up all at once.
It takes maximum power to break the wheels free. The nose wheel can't be controlled, and at slow speeds, Darrell has to adjust the engine power to steer the plane. Finally, it is moving in a wide circle out onto the lake, on its way toward the end of the runway. The plane is bounced and shaken by the frozen snowdrifts.
Okay, let's go to that fire that destroyed the Kee Bird. It wasn't a random accident.
Suddenly, smoke can be seen pouring from the windows in the cockpit. The auxiliary power unit, a standby generator, was thrown from its mounting in the rear fuselage and caught fire. Fortunately, the crew managed to jump clear. Darrell shouts for more extinguishers, but it is too late. The fire has already swept through the plane. He can do nothing but stand and watch as this irreplaceable piece of aviation history is consumed by fire.
Apparently the APU was left running in the tail, and the fuel tank broke loose and dumped fuel on the APU and started the fire in the tail. That's where the fire extinguisher was, but we couldn't get to it.
If you think about it, from an engineering project management standpoint, it was the intersection of stressed systems. Handling fuel in extreme conditions. Aging electrical insulation. Compressed and shortened timelines. Of course, then you got to throw in human fatigue and the operational urgency behind the impending weather. Any of those might have been survivable. However, together, they all formed a failure mode with no escape. This wasn't a single mistake. It was the system revealing its limits. It may sound a little cheesy, but this was the moment when all of that accumulated risk finally found a path to release. Now, when we all watched the documentary, the Kee Bird almost escaped the ice. We all saw it. And that's what makes its story so important. Because success didn't require brilliance. In this case, it required perfection. Every one of those systems aboard that plane had to work. Every decision surrounding the engines and the propellers and the spare parts had to land correctly. Every delay, whether it was weather-related or due to a mechanical issue, had to be absorbed. And let's face it, in the world of engineering, demanding perfection is the same as inviting failure. Especially environments that punish hesitation and rather reward humility. Let's face it, the Kee Bird wasn't lost because the team lacked skill. Each and every one of those guys brought a high level of competency. Rather, the Kee Bird was lost because ambition outran the logistics. And logistics never forgive optimism.
It was ready to go. That's the real tragedy of it. I mean, we were so close. Success was right there. It was right there. But this is my game, and I'd do it again.
The lesson of the Kee Bird wasn't that recovery was impossible. Rather, it's how close the system came to failing long before that. Because when too many things have to go right, failure, it doesn't need drama. It only needs a little bit of time. And that's the part of this story we rarely talk about.